can get started. So welcome everybody. My name is Cara Bell and I am the Public Relations Officer for the Claire Booth Luce Center for Conservative Women. I'm so happy to have you joining us this afternoon to hear our guest speaker, Katherine Rodriguez. So here at the Center for Conservative Women, our mission is to prepare young women for effective leadership and to promote leading conservative women. Our materials, programs, initiatives, blogs, newsletters, and social media communications support ideas and efforts that are pro-America, pro-family, support free enterprise and entrepreneurship. And we encourage our supporters and students to be active ambassadors of conservative philosophy at their schools, in their workplaces, and within their communities. If you are interested in learning more about the Center for Conservative Women, I invite you to visit our website at cblwomen.org, or you can email us at info@cblwomen.org. We also email monthly newsletters with the latest news and upcoming events. And if you're interested in getting on our email list, you can email the info@cblwomen.org email. Okay, so let's jump into the webinar. So introducing Katherine Rodriguez is our program officer, Emily Langen. Emily joined our team exactly 1 year ago, and since then has helped organize lectures and other programming to encourage college-age conservative women to be bold and confident and to be leaders for conservative principles. So here she is.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Katherine. Good to see you. So today I have the pleasure to introduce you to our Luce alumna, Katherine Rodriguez. While a student at Randolph-Macon Women's College, Katherine spent a summer semester here with us as a Luce intern. That was before my time, but it's been great to get to work with her since then. Post-graduation, she began her career with us as an administrative assistant and eventually held titles of program director and lecture director. Katherine played an important role in reaching young women on their college campuses with outstanding conservative women speakers. Katherine went on to the talent acquisition team at the Charles Koch Institute, identifying top talents at all levels, from interns to senior staff, and participated in selection efforts for the Koch Associate Program and Koch Internship programs. Today, as well as being a wife and mother of 2 young children, Katherine is a senior talent acquisition business partner, where she supports all hiring at every experience level for Stand Together Foundation, Charles Koch Institute and Foundation, and other connected groups. Katherine's expertise and knowledge provides you with a great opportunity to learn what you might expect in the rapidly changing evolution of technology, job markets, the weird job market we're in currently, and the hiring process, and how to ace each step of the way. Please join me in warmly welcoming Katherine Rodriguez to today's seminar.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. And thank you so much for having me. I know that Emily talked a little bit about the experience that I've had with Claire Booth Luce, and I am really honored to be talking to you guys today because I learned so much as an intern and then as a full-time staff there, working with the staff folks there and also the speakers. So I'm excited to share with you some of what I've learned from then, but also what I've learned since then, because in the last just over 10 years, I have seen a lot of folks really ace the interview process and really showcase themselves well, but I've also seen folks really fail to do that in the best way possible. So I'm going to share with you some general tips to keep in mind for all stages of the interview process, whatever they might look like. I'm going to talk a little more specifically about video interviews because that is probably a thing that, of course, we're seeing more of right now, but we're probably going to continue to see that integrated as part of the hiring process. So I want to give you a few insights there, and then I'll talk about a little bit on phone interviews, in-person interviews, just brief on those because they may not, in-person may not be happening as much right now, but it's certainly not going away. And then I know Cara will be helping to facilitate some questions at the end, so I'll be happy to chat through that. So let's start with some of the general things that you can keep in mind throughout the whole process. Some of these are going to seem like no-brainers, and you're going to think, oh my gosh, Katherine, of course I would do that. That would never happen to me. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that these things could never happen to you. Job searching can be very nerve-wracking. You can get ahead of yourself. Sometimes you move too quickly. and you miss steps or you just forget things. So don't fall into that trap. And I hope you'll pay attention and take some things away. First thing I want to encourage you to do is always follow all the application instructions. That is one of those things that feels like a no-brainer, but it's actually really easy to do. Make sure you provide everything that the folks are asking for. If they're asking for a GPA, if they're asking for your transcripts, if they're asking for a cover letter, make sure that you include those things as part of your application. It's not the end of the world if you forget, or if you skip a step, or if you didn't see it, but know that having a good understanding means that you'll likely move through the process much more quickly. They might come back to you and say, oh my gosh, could you please upload your work sample? We'd love to talk to you, but we see that it's not been included. But they've also still probably got 5 or 6 or maybe more other candidates that did do all the things they were supposed to do. And they're moving forward while you are still trying to find the place to upload your work sample because you forgot to do it before. So definitely pay attention to those pieces. If you can find a frequently asked questions page or a what to expect page, definitely take a look at that. A lot of larger companies and organizations have those that will give you an outline of what do we need? What are we looking for? What can you expect? But if anything ever seems unclear, if you get to the end of the application, hit submit, never saw the place to upload your work sample or anything else, just reach out to the point of contact. Again, not the end of the world, but try really hard to be thorough on that. Make sure you're following those instructions so you don't lose time in the process. Try to keep a spreadsheet or other form of organizing yourself in your applications. Avoid what we call spray and pray, which the internet makes really easy to do. Click and send, click and send, click and send. Then you start to forget where you applied and when. Keep track of that and do your research ahead of time on the organizations you're applying to and the opportunities that you are looking into and submitting an application for. There's a lot of benefits to this for you and for the hiring team, but for you, it really shows that you're committed to the process. You're committed to the organization. You've invested time in understanding who they are and why this could be a good opportunity for you. And it shows that you're really thorough in how you prepare. This will help you, of course, answer questions and know what you're getting into in the process or in the organization. But it's also helpful to help folks think that, oh, wow, this person was so thorough in understanding who we were and what we do and how they connect to that. I bet you they could be just as thorough in how they go about this part of this role or how they perform this in an internship. Those dots are going to be connected for folks all along the way. The last thing that you want to do is get the question of why this opportunity and why this organization, and your answers are, actually, I don't remember what role I applied to. Can you remind me what this internship is? Or I definitely want to work at nonprofits in DC, but what do you do again? Right? That doesn't showcase you in the best light when there are many other candidates who have done that research and have drawn those connections. Always expect the why this job and why us question, even when it's a private company, because almost everyone will ask that. Doing that research is also going to help you prioritize your applications and possibly self-select out of the opportunities that actually aren't going to be right for you. I can't tell you how many times I've had folks book phone interviews with me after they've applied for opportunities. So they've actually taken the action, they've submitted the application, and then 2 minutes into the conversation, they say, oh my gosh, you guys are working on this. Oh, I don't want to be part of that at all. And then the conversation's over. That's fine, but I could have given that time slot to someone else. You could have spent your time applying somewhere else or looking for something different. So definitely do that research ahead of time. Another thing I want you to keep in mind throughout the interview process is that your time with your interviewer, whether it's a recruiter, whether it's somebody on the hiring team in the organization, that time is a finite resource, and it's really precious when you think about it. In a lot of organizations, the first step in the process may only be a 15 to 20-minute phone call with one of those people. That's only 15 to 20 minutes for the person on the other end of the line to understand who you are, why you would be a great candidate for this role, walk away from that conversation and be able to make a confident recommendation on advancing you. If they're spending 15 out of those 20 minutes telling you information that you could have found out if you'd done a little more research ahead of time, they're not going to walk away with everything they need to be able to make that recommendation that they want to. And if they've seen other candidates where they did get that information, then that's now slowed you down in the process or removed you entirely. So it'll only help you to spend extra time researching the missions, the vision, what the opportunity is, if they've been in the news lately and why. All those things will be helpful and important to you. You do not have to be an expert though. So don't try to go crazy. Don't try to look at every single web page. I just want to understand, and other hiring teams will want to understand how you're drawing the connections to why you want to be there and what this internship would mean to you, how you could be a strong contributor. Answer questions as directly and succinctly as possible. This can be harder than you think because you're nervous. You're nervous in a phone interview or a video interview. And so you may not realize that you're giving 3 examples instead of 1 because you're just so excited to talk about the things that you've done that you just keep going. But it goes back to that time is a resource and time is finite with that person. So if they ask you for 1 example and you think, oh my gosh, I have 3 great examples, it's okay to pause for a minute and say, let me think on that a moment. Let me tell you about this example where I did X or where I did Y. Folks will appreciate that you pause to think of what your best example would be. If you're on video or if you're on the phone, you have the opportunity to write down questions as folks are asking them. On a phone, I can't see you do that, so it's not distracting. It's only helpful to you. And on video, I really can't see you do that either because I'm only seeing this much of you. So take advantage of that. Write down questions if it helps you stay on track and stay focused. It's also totally okay to ask that a question be restated. I would much rather have folks say, I really want to give you the best answer and what you're looking for, but I'm afraid that I don't understand the question that you asked. Could you restate it for me? That is much better than trying to figure out in your head while you're rambling through a couple examples that you think might fit, because now you've burned up time and you know that you didn't really understand the question asked, and now you're not sure if you gave them what they were looking for. Give them the opportunity to restate it. That is not going to make you look like a poor candidate because you asked them to restate a question. This next one is going to feel like one of those no-brainer things. But no one is immune to using unprofessional filler words or language that's just a little bit distracting. And that's because we talk a lot. So when we're talking to each other casually in the office or at school or wherever it might be in our family, we tend to use words like or right? Those are the ones that come to mind most immediately. The other ones, though, that I see a lot of, and I see this so much with entry-level candidates lately, and I'm not sure what it is, but I hear a lot of things like, yeah, and you know, at the end of sentences, or your guys's. I really hate that one. I really don't like that, and other folks don't like that language and cringe a little because it means they have to wade through that language of what you're saying to understand what you're really telling them. Once you get rid of those words or replace them with something different, then you come through much more articulate and folks can really understand what you're trying to tell them and what you're trying to convey. This is especially helpful for opportunities that may not even be public facing. So it might not be an internship that has a public speaking component or even a full-time role that has a public facing component, but maybe you need to be really highly collaborative with other teams. They need to know that you're going to be able to articulate clearly and succinctly with those other teams what you're working on, what you need, what they might need from you. Those are all important things that get lost if you use language like, you know, and yeah. Start practicing now, dropping those words or replacing them with something else. This will not fix itself overnight. I have been in the professional world for more than 10 years, and I still catch myself saying some of these things all the time. It helps if you practice in your everyday conversation. I found the easiest thing was to start with yeah and replace it with yes. It doesn't change that I'm qualified for a role if I say yeah instead of yes, but it comes through as more mature, it comes through more clearly, and folks tend to appreciate it, even if they don't necessarily pinpoint that as the thing that they're really excited about. So start with that. Whenever you say yeah, stop yourself and say yes, and then start to pull out some of those other words that you might be saying and not really realize. Next thing is prep some questions for your interviewer beforehand and prioritize your top 1, 2, or even 3 questions out of those. Your interview process will almost always leave time for questions at each stage. The time at the initial stage tends to be a little bit shorter, but if you go to a second or a third stage, however long that process is, that's where you tend to have a little bit more time to ask questions. Be prepared that you might run out of time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're having a great conversation with your interviewer and you get to minute 18 of 20 and they ask you for questions, you probably only have time to ask 1 or 2. What 1 or 2 questions do you really want to know the answer to so that you can decide for yourself if this is an opportunity you want to continue to invest in? So it's partially a way to show that you're engaged in the process, you're thinking critically about the opportunity and how you could contribute to the organization or to the team. But there's also a benefit for you because you might not want to move forward based on what some of those answers are. And that's not a bad thing. Right now, some of the things that might matter most to you are what types of projects do you get to work on? Is there an opportunity for you to be mentored by someone who's more experienced on the team? Those things are important. Ask those questions. Research your interviewer ahead of time if you know who it's going to be. Most of the time you will. If you haven't gotten that information, it's okay to ask your point of contact who you're going to be talking to. See if you can find them on LinkedIn. Do they have a staff bio? How long have they been there? Do you have any overlapping studies or alma maters that you could draw on to better understand the opportunity, but also connect with that interviewer? If you have a similar course of study, for instance, in your background, you may want to ask questions about how did that course of study help or make it more difficult for them to perform in that role? Oh, I see that you've been there for 6 or 7 years. What's your experience been on the team and in the organization? What do you really love and what's really challenging? Don't miss the opportunity to really get that inside look of what it's like to be there, because now you're talking to the folks that are there and can give you the answers that you're looking for. People love to talk about themselves. So feel free to ask them questions like, how long have you been there? What do you enjoy? What's challenging? And I'm sure that they'll be happy to share that with you. One of your questions should always be, what are the next steps in the process and when can I expect to hear from you? This is more to help you than them. It helps you anticipate what next steps could be, how you might want to think about preparing for what those steps might be, but also gives you a good indicator of when it's appropriate to follow up if you haven't heard anything, or when it's time to move on. So if they say, I'm going to get back in touch with you on the 15th comes and goes, you can follow back up with them and say, hey, I really enjoyed the conversation with you. I loved learning more about this opportunity. I'd love to continue exploring it if you're interested, but I know I haven't heard back from you yet. Can I provide you with a reference? Can I provide you with another work sample? Looking forward to hearing from you. They may get back to you. Sometimes it's volume. Sometimes folks just get a little bit behind. There are any number of reasons that might have nothing to do with they're not moving you forward. But if you reach out and you don't hear anything back after a specific length of time, it's probably okay to continue moving on with other opportunities. Another question I get a lot from folks that I wanted to cover with you guys that may be less relevant for internships, but is still important, and especially I know I'm sure some of you are going to be out in the working world in the next year or so, or maybe sooner. Is it ever okay to ask about salary or to ask about pay? The trend on this is more towards yes than no. More companies and organizations are embracing transparency in what compensation looks like. So often you'll see job descriptions that include like a pay scale or a salary range, what's budgeted for the role. Internships generally have a set pay rate that you can't negotiate. But if you don't see that pay rate listed in the job description, definitely ask about it because that's going to be important for you to know. Is it hourly? Can you get overtime? Is it a stipend? Those are helpful for you in understanding what your living expenses might be. So definitely ask. If you are interviewing for a regular full-time role, that could look a little bit different. You'll want to have a sense of what you're looking for and what your value might be in the market. Use the resources that are available to you online. Payscale, salary.com, LinkedIn, I think does a salary calculator. Understand that anything you use like that is individuals reporting their salary tends to be inflated in the market by about 10 to 15%. Not a lot, right? So it's still a good indicator of where you might be and what value you might have. Understand though that a lot of them just show an average, and the average is looking like this, but the market looks like this. So you've got a big range of what's lower bound, what's upper bound in the market. Probably at this stage in your career, you're in the middle or the lower bound in most cases. And that's purely because you don't have a ton of work experience in your background to speak to what you could accomplish in that role. So folks are taking a bet on you more so than they would someone with 30 years of experience who understands, you accomplished this, it did Y, and there's a little bit more information for them to go on with that. And I can talk a little bit more about salaries and things like that at the end, because I know sometimes folks have a lot of questions about that, but I want to be sure to talk about a few other things too. Is it ever okay to ask for feedback from an interviewer? This comes up most often if you are declined. So if you're rejected by email or a phone call or a letter, the first thing folks think is, oh my gosh, what did I not do right? What's the feedback? Why didn't folks want to move forward with me? It's okay to ask for feedback. I would encourage you to ask for feedback as much as you can. However, don't be surprised if you don't get it, and don't take it personally or as any sort of sign that you should think negatively about yourself as a candidate for a role if you don't receive any feedback. That's because a lot of internal legal teams actually discourage recruiters and human resources and hiring teams, discourage them from giving very detailed feedback because there's a lot of liability potentially in that, unfortunately. And a lot of businesses and organizations have just decided they don't want to take on that risk. Now, that being said, if folks can give you feedback, they will, and it's perfectly okay to ask. If you can't get feedback, try to find out who got that role or who got that internship. Maybe it's obvious that they are already going to law school, right, for that legal focused internship, whereas you were going to go in 2 years. And so it might be as simple as that. Maybe they had more writing experience. You just don't know, but understanding who got the position could help you. Another good question to ask to get a sense at any point in the interview process of what potential feedback could be is something like, is there anything on my resume or my application that would give you or anyone else some concern about my ability to do this role or my qualifications? That can usually be a good quick pulse point on what the conversation's been like. They may say something like, well, actually, this role includes a lot of X and Y. I can see that you've done a lot of X, but not so much Y. Is there anything else you can tell me about your experience with that? So now you've opened the door for folks to address a concern they might have. So definitely ask about that, but don't panic too much if you don't get it. All right, I want to chat about video interviews, and I'm going to spend probably more time on video interviews than phone and in person, because video interviews are probably what you're going to see the most of right now. They were already becoming a pretty integrated part of interview processes. They save time for candidates, for organizations and companies, because they don't have the same time that it takes to fly you out or to get the team together. They could do a video interview anytime. You could do a video interview tomorrow, whereas it might take 3 days for you to be able to fly out here. So you will continue to see video interviews as part of the norm. I would expect them in almost all interview processes that you might be starting to engage in. That might not be true, but I think for the foreseeable future, you're probably going to engage in a lot of them. So I want to spend several minutes chatting about some of these pieces. First thing is going to seem like one of those no-brainer things, but check and double check your technology. Check it 3 times, check it 4 times, check it an hour before. Make sure that things are working, because the last thing that you want is to have done all sorts of preparation, feel really good about your interview, ready to answer questions, and you sit down to log into the video interview and you're prompted to download something that's going to take 10 minutes because when it restarts your computer, your Windows updates kicks in, and so now you're sitting there for 10 or 15 minutes and you're late to your interview that you were really well prepared for. And if you just worked that in a little earlier in your prep, you could have avoided it. Even if you just make it and you still make it on time, you might be thrown off your game because now you've been worrying in the last 2 minutes about, oh my gosh, am I going to make it on time? Is my video going to work? Is everything going to be okay? Instead of thinking, okay, this is what I want to highlight. I want to talk about this. You kind of throw yourself off. So check your technology as much as you can. If they offer you a tutorial or they say, hey, do you want to sit with one of our coordinators for 5 minutes just to test your video? I know our team tends to offer that for video interviews. Always say yes. If they have a resource online that gives you some more step-by-step instructions, read it. Even if you've done Zoom 1,000 times or you've used other platforms 1,000 times, don't count on it always working every single time. So definitely test it. I know we've used in video interviews that I do, because I use them quite often for what I recruit for. I will use 3 different types of platforms depending on what folks are using typically, who's interviewing, where they might be located. So definitely take the opportunity to check your technology, even if you've done it 100 times. Try not to rely on your mobile phone for video interviews. I realize right now you may not always have access to a laptop or a tablet to use. Your phone might be your best option. If that's your best option, use it. Don't turn down a video interview because you don't have a laptop, but prop it on something that's stable. This is not FaceTime with your mom or with your family. So the moving around can get really, really distracting. It also feels a little more casual and less appropriate for an interview. So if you must use your phone, just prop it on something that's not going to move while you're having the conversation. Now, all this being said, you may check your technology 5 times, have your phone propped on something stable, or your laptop ready to go, and 2 hours before your video interview, there's an internet outage, or your dog ate your phone. I don't know if that happens, but it could happen. The point is that glitches do happen, and you cannot control everything. If that happens, reach out to whoever your point of contact is, even if it's 2 hours before, just to say, hey, this is happening right now. My internet's out. I know they're working on it. I'm hoping to get it back. I'll check back in before the actual interview. Do you have any other suggestions as to the best course of action, or does that sound okay? Try by phone first to get them, because that's a little faster. Follow up by email. If you don't get them by phone, just do everything you can to let them know that there's a glitch or a problem. The majority of people are working from home right now, especially in the Washington, D.C. area. So they're probably also experiencing these kinds of glitches, neighborhood outages, things like that, that you just can't plan for. And most people aren't going to be really understanding about that. And they'll say, that happens. Let's find a better time if you'd feel more comfortable so we can be sure that your tech is working. Video interviews are usually done live. So like this kind of conversation where the person's on the other end at the same time as you are, you're interacting as if you're having a conversation in person, but know that this can be done in different ways. So there are actually platforms that some teams will use where it's like recorded. So you'll see somebody come up that asks you a question, and then you have 2 minutes to answer the question, and then it stops, and then it plays the next one, and then you get 2 minutes. These are becoming more popular, usually in places where they have a very high volume of applicants, because then they'll watch them all later. So just know that that's a possibility. It could be different, but usually it's done live. Keep your surroundings in mind. That others also seems like a no-brainer. You do get a little bit of grace on this one because a library or quiet space, public library, may not be as available to you, or may not be available to you at all right now. So the best place that you might be able to do your video interview might be your room, or might be your living room, or might be somewhere in your house, right? Think to yourself, is what my interviewer can see in the background reflective of what I want them to remember about me professionally? Is it distracting? I would rather see your unfinished basement walls than your 3-day-old pile of laundry. I can't tell if it's clean or dirty when I'm on the video. I'm not in your room, I don't know. And your unmade bed and your closet doors wide open. That does not showcase you as someone who prepares ahead of time or is thorough in thinking about what your surroundings are and how you're presenting yourself. That in and of itself is not necessarily a disqualifier, right, for many roles, but it's distracting and it takes away from what you're trying to say. Don't rely on being able to blur the background or put a picture on the background. Some platforms will have this turned off, or you won't have the opportunity to do it. So if you must, go to your basement. Use your unfinished walls as your background if you don't feel good about any other place that you might be. Try to find an angle where the sun's in front of you or the light's in front of you instead of behind you. I want to see your face and interact with you and not see you in shadow. So keep that in mind too. Move things around if you have to. I have a lamp that I move around in my office. This is my home office that I'm in right now. I have a lamp that I move around when I need to, if I need a little bit of extra light. Also make sure you have a strong signal, of course, and have mitigated possible interruptions. Don't take shortcuts on your professional dress and on being prepared that anything could happen. I've seen a lot of pictures of folks that are business on top and party on the bottom, and they post it on social media where they've got a great blazer, everything's on top, looks great, but they have their neon workout shorts on. If everything goes well, I can't see that, and I will never know that you did that. You may have told everyone in your house that you're doing a video interview. They've promised to be quiet. They've got your sibling in a room somewhere, but did you tell your dog? Did you tell your cat? Your normally quiet little brother suddenly goes screaming down the hall, or your family dog suddenly needs to get out of the room when he will typically rest at your feet. Those things happen. If you had to get up in the middle of your video interview, would it still be okay? If you're not sure, the answer is no. Go ahead and just dress professionally, because you never know if you might have to get up. It also might make you feel a little bit more on your game to be dressed and ready for an interview as if you would be in person. If something unexpected does happen, it's okay to just politely excuse yourself. I'm so sorry. May I step away for a moment so that I can let my dog out? Most people will say something like, oh my gosh, yes, totally. I have 3 dogs at home. They're all working from home too, for the most part right now, and they get it. Just mute yourself. If you can turn off your camera, turn it off. Go deal with it. Come back. Turn everything back on. Thank you so much for your patience. What else can I tell you about my qualifications? Sometimes it's not that something unexpected happens. It's how you handle the unexpected. So keep your cool and just take care of it and come back. On that same note, what should you wear in a video interview? Keep it professional and not distracting. So avoid really loud patterns, avoid really thin stripes because they tend to warp kind of weird on video. There's a word for what that is. I can't remember it, but they just don't always look that good, whereas you can get away with that in person. If you want to wear a pattern, that's okay. Make sure it's muted with a blazer or scarf. Dress as if you were actually in the room with that person, if that helps you think about it. If you think to yourself, well, but I want to show my personality, Catherine, I get it. Accessories are a good way to do that when you're in person. When you're on video, earrings are okay. If you have a headband that you want to wear, a necklace you want to wear that's not too loud and distracting, that's where you can get in a little bit more of your personality while not being super distracted. A lot of the preparation for phone interviews is pretty similar, so I won't spend too much time there. Do your research, take notes. That's like I said, that is a really big benefit of video and phone interviews because I can't see you doing it, and so it's less distracting than it would be in person. Take notes on the questions folks are asking you. Take notes on their answers. You can do that in person too, but take notes. take advantage of that. Make sure you're in a quiet place, just like video interviews. You got a little more flexibility on the phone because I can't see where you are. So if you need to be in a closet and you've got the best signal possible, that's perfectly fine. Do that because I can't see where you are. It's okay to go outside if you need to. Make sure it's not in a noisy place. If you can hear the noise, bet your interview can hear it too. And make sure it's not a windy day. Otherwise, I just hear all the wind in the background. I want to be sure I leave time for questions. So I'm going to say a little bit more about in-person interviews because they're not going away. You will still have them, just probably not in the immediate. And then a couple parting things, and then I'll stop for questions. For in-person interviews, this seems like a no-brainer. Make sure you map out where you're going well ahead of time. If you're local, travel. Do that drive. Know what it's going to be if you can. If you are not local and it's an internship you're applying for, you're probably less likely to have an in-person interview. But if you're local to the organization and it's an internship, they may ask you to go ahead and come in if their offices are reopened and we're out of all the mess we're in right now. If anything is ever unclear about the instructions for an in-person interview, so what to do when you get there, who to call, where to park, where to get there from the metro. Same is true of video interviews as well. If anything ever seems unclear about the platform or about what you should do or when, just ask. Ask your point of contact. They'd all rather you ask and have the right information than not, and potentially be really worried about it because you're worried about asking about it. Please ask. Dress for in-person interviews, pretty similar guidance to videos. Is it going to portray you in your best light? So solids are great. Suits are always preferable. Always better to be a little bit overdressed than to be underdressed. It's pretty rare that I'll hear hiring teams after an interview say something like, wow, that person was just really overdressed. I don't know, if that's the right kind of thing. But they are more likely to say, my gosh, that person showed up in a wrinkly shirt and sneakers. This is a public-facing role. This doesn't feel like the right level of judgment. So okay to be a little overdressed and underdressed. Showcase your personality and your accessories if you need to. Avoid really strong patterns if you can, only because they're distracting. Avoid things that are too low or too short. If you are not sure, sit down in a chair. Are you pulling something up or pulling something down? If you're doing either of those things, it's probably not the outfit that you want to wear that day because you don't want to be distracted by it either if you're trying to continually adjust it. Take a notebook with your questions written down to an in-person interview. Don't be shy about taking notes about answers typically that they're giving you to questions. This actually shows a lot of engagement in a conversation. And folks really like to see that. They like to see that you're listening to them and that you're trying to internalize what they're saying. So definitely bring a notebook with you to the interview. Extra copies of your resume never hurts to have. The best interviewers will always be prepared, or the recruiters, if you're working with a recruiter, will make sure that they have that information, but it never hurts to have it just in case. Maybe they ran late from a meeting and they came right to the interview and couldn't stop at their desk to get it. You never know, and it helps you look more thorough and prepared if you have some ready to show. Couple of last thoughts. I think I actually saw this pop up as a question, so I'm glad that I'm going to cover it now. So I'll just do a couple of last thoughts and then stop and work with Kara on questions. Should I send a thank you note through the mail or over email after any part of the interview? There's a lot of different schools of thought on this. The trend that I've seen these days, and this is based on feedback I hear from hiring managers or folks that are hiring interns, is that digital thank yous are just fine. I think it still stands out if you send nothing at all. It can only help you to send something. If you send a digital thank you, still personalize it. So don't send the same email to every person because you can bet that they're all sharing your thank you emails with each other to see if that's what you did. So try and personalize them as much as possible. It doesn't hurt to follow up with a hard copy thank you. Put it in the mail that afternoon or the next day. They're going to get the email right away. They may not get the card for a few days. That's fine. this is a good time in this environment to do a digital thank you, because most folks aren't working on site right now. And so any mail you send to their physical office space, they may not get for a while, since places may be doing that differently. So go ahead and follow up with a digital thank you at every stage of the process to everyone that you talk to, and then just follow up with the hard copy in the next, usually within 24 hours. Always take the phone call with someone. So you never know what could happen. You may have applied for a policy internship and you get a rejection for that, but somebody offers you a phone call to talk about a communications internship. Take the call. Get someone on the phone, talk a little bit about that opportunity, let them get to know you, because they may see something that you don't and know about opportunities that you don't know about yet. And you might be really surprised what keeping an open mind will help you to discover and find out. Doesn't mean that you find that that other opportunity is the right one for you, and they may talk to you and find that that's also true. But now you've had some sort of extended touch point with a member of the hiring team or a recruiter. They know more about you and they can keep you in mind for other things that might come down the line. Last thing I want to say is no interview is perfect. So you're probably never going to walk out of an interview and say, oh my gosh, 100%, that was the most perfect answers, best day ever, nothing was wrong. That will probably not happen. You're probably always going to walk away from an interview and think to yourself, gosh, I wish I could have answered this question this way, or was that a good answer? This was a great answer. I feel really good about this. Give yourself an immediate debrief. So as soon as you finish any stage of the interview, do a quick brain dump of what were the questions that were asked. How did you answer them? Where did you feel excited about the answer that you gave, versus what were the areas that you thought, oh, I'm not really sure I answered that question well, or I think I could have given them a better example. Download that, because you might get a similar question in the next stage of the process or in another interview process that you're going through. And now you've learned through these other conversations what you feel most confident about, what works and what doesn't. Not all interview misses mean you bombed for good. So if you stumble over a question, or if you just totally fudge an answer and you look back and think, oh my gosh, that wasn't even the question that they asked, I don't even know where my brain was. That does not mean the end of the world. Doesn't mean that you're not going to get that internship. I always like to think about a candidate that our team was working with who fell down the steps outside of our building 2 minutes before his in-person interview. He got dirt all over the front of him. It must have been a muddy day, if I remember, and he ripped a hole in his suit pants. And he still got the job, and he still works there, and they love him. He does great. That worked because he kept his cool about it. He acknowledged that it was there, right? And he added a little humor, and then he just moved right along, and his confidence and never cracked. And the team looked at that and said, my gosh, well, that is a way to handle stress well, or how to adapt and pivot in the moment. And he got the job. So don't feel that every miss means you bombed it and that everything's over and you're never going to move forward. You can learn from every experience. But like I said earlier, sometimes it's not that the unexpected happens or that you didn't answer a question well. It's how you use that information and how you react from it and learn moving forward. Remember, your interviewers want you to do well. No one that interviews you wants you to do badly. They want you to do well. They're not out to get you. If they are, it's probably not a place that you want to work anyways. They want you to be successful. I never send a person forward to the next step of an interview process that I don't feel confident is going to do well and could do that job. So keep that in mind if that helps your anxiety. Folks want you to do well. They want you to do a good job, and they want to help you do that if they can. So that's all the tips that I have for you, and I will leave it to Kara to help with some of the questions.
Thank you so much, Katherine, for offering such really helpful advice. You got to the thank you letters with the interviews, but another question we had was, at what point is it appropriate to ask about salary in the interview process? In the second interview, or what seems to be the final interview, over email as you approach the end? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so I would think about it this way. If the hiring team has invested in you through the whole course of an interview process, which could be 3 weeks, it could be 3 months, hopefully it's not, but it could be, right? In some instances, and you get to the very end and they make you an offer and you say, oh my gosh, I can't accept that. That is just not anywhere near the salary level I need. Well, that would have been something that they would have wanted to know earlier. So they could figure out, could I be flexible? Do I have another opportunity that's more appropriate for this person? What else can I give them that would be helpful or would be exciting to them? So I actually encourage folks to ask as early as possible in the process. I don't think it's a bad thing to ask at the first step. You probably don't want to start serious salary negotiations until you get further into the process or have an offer in hand. But I don't think it hurts to ask, even in that first conversation, especially if you're going to be relocating for that opportunity and you are even more concerned about what that income is going to be so that you can make that move and make it work. But it's also an opportunity for folks on the hiring side, if they can't meet that, to say, okay, that's not what we've budgeted for this role. What other things are exciting to you? Maybe they'll turn around and say, okay, we can't meet that in your paycheck, but we can do this and we can give you additional pay time off, or we can allow you to work from home 1 day a week, or we can throw in, you know, this additional piece of compensation. We can review your compensation in 6 months. So there are other ways to think about compensation that I think benefits hiring teams to start thinking about sooner rather than later.
Great. And then when would you say it's appropriate to negotiate for things like in-kind income and education stipends, like the company paying for you to get a master's? Is it appropriate to even bring up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think of those things, and many, especially human resources teams, think of those as benefits. And they can tell you pretty quickly if that's something that they're able to do, if they have a student loan policy, or if they have an education stipend that they can provide to folks, what that process is. That's typically a benefit, and you can ask about that at the very beginning of the process, because they'll be able to tell you pretty quickly if that's a thing that they can accommodate or if they're not able to.
Awesome. And when is it appropriate to offer work samples? When you apply or during interviews, or, you know, since everything's digitally over email so that they can actually see?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think there are probably differing schools of thought on this. So I don't encourage folks to offer work samples unless they're asked for. And some of that is because is kind of a legal thing. It's a risk thing in consistency in hiring. If we have someone who gives us work samples that we use as part of our hiring decision, but we decline someone who got to that same part in the hiring decision and we didn't ask them for work samples, that's a liability. And there can be some inconsistency in the job seeking process there that folks may not want to risk. So I actually think it's fine to offer work samples at any point, but know that folks may decline it. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're not moving forward or that it doesn't matter to them. It may mean they're trying to maintain consistency in how candidates move through the process. I would not necessarily do it the second you apply, unless they are asking for work samples. I would, if you feel compelled to offer that, I would wait until that first phone call is scheduled, that first interview is scheduled, when you are following up to say, oh, I'm so excited to chat with you at 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Would it be helpful if I sent a work sample ahead of time? And that lets them say yes or no, but also means that you were able to offer.
Great. And then do you have any general tips about resumes, like the big do's and don'ts?
Yes. A couple of big do's that come to mind. Make sure that the font is a normal font and not something that looks very artsy. That does not always show up well in an application portal and how folks are reviewing resumes, and that is out of your control. That's not a thing you can control or I can necessarily control. If you stick to some of the standard fonts, always a safe thing to do. Always have them in PDF format. Don't use Word format if you can help it. Definitely do PDF. I like to follow, and I actually think Google said this too, and they said it and I thought, this is what I've been trying to say for years. It's an X, Y, and Z formula in your resume. So I did X and accomplished Y by doing Z. So I can see this is what the action was or what you were working on. This was what you did, and this was the result. You can apply that formula to internships, extracurriculars, maybe you increased your campus club's turnout for events by 200% by employing more strategic marketing on your campus. Great. So I'm not just reading, okay, you were in charge of marketing. I can also see that you actually accomplished something with it, which sticks out as more compelling for folks to read and look at. Stick to one page, especially if you're early career. I like to think every 5 years you can add a page, because as you move forward in your professional work experience, you can start to drop internships, extracurricular work, things like that that are relevant when you're starting out, but become less relevant because you have other work experience as you move forward. Only don'ts that I have are, besides sending in Word, get rid of objective statements. Hopefully folks aren't using those anymore. Sometimes folks do. If you're going to use an objective statement, use it to convey when you are looking for something that looking for a role that's radically different from what your resume might suggest. So I did a healthcare studies, or I studied to be a nurse, but I would like to be in policy because I want to use my healthcare studies to affect healthcare policy, right? Because I'm looking at your experience and I'm seeing this person's an RN and they have this background. I can kind of draw the dots where this could be exciting, but using an objective statement for that is much better than, I want to work in DC in a nonprofit. You applied and I'm going to understand that that's what you want to do. So just use objective statements sparingly or not at all if you don't need them.
Right, that's good advice. I know I even have a lot of friends that always wondered, do I keep this objective statement? Is it even helpful? What does it even do? So good advice. And is it appropriate in the interview process to ask about other open positions in their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the person that you're talking to, especially if it's a recruiter, they're going to know a lot more about opportunities that are available right now than you necessarily will. They may know what jobs are coming in the next month, 2 months, or 3 months that aren't even out there yet. So I think it's perfectly okay to indicate that you're open to other positions. What I would caution you against is when you're asked why this position, that you say, well, I'm really open to anything and everything looks exciting to me, because that feels like you lack intention and direction. So be careful about using it there, but I think it's perfectly fine to encourage the person you're talking to let you know, are there other opportunities that you think I would be a better fit for, if not this one? I'd love to learn more about that if that comes up along the way.
Great, and since we're kind of running close to 3 o'clock, this will be our last question. But do you have any general tips for cover letters? How long should they be? What type of information should you put in them?
Yeah. So I would think of a good cover letter length to be maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of a page. I don't think it needs to be much longer than that. I think 2 good paragraphs or even 3 good paragraphs is enough. My general guidance for cover letters is, if I'm reading in your cover letter exactly what's on your resume and you're just restating it in sentence format, it's not adding a tremendous amount of value. I'm probably going to read 2 sentences and skip to the resume because you're telling me the same things that are on your resume. What I'd rather see is what you think is unique about your qualification for this role. Do you have some personal way that you are connecting to our mission or vision that I'm not going to know in your resume because you're trying to tell me your accomplishments in your role, but I will be able to know if you talk about it in a cover letter? Those types of things that are not what I'll find out on your resume, that's the kind of stuff that I would encourage folks to put in a cover letter if they're being asked to provide one.
Great. Well, Katherine, thank you so much for your time today. You did a really excellent job, and I know you gave a lot of great advice for the students and even alumni that are listening in right now. And so I just want to give you a big thank you, and we hope to see you again soon.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you guys. Find me on LinkedIn if you'd like to and connect with me there so I can get to know all you guys too. But thanks so much for having me.
All right. Thank you. Bye.